It was just another morning in the desert when Dr. Ava Matthews, an archaeologist with a reputation for uncovering the impossible, stumbled upon something that would change everything. The hot sun beat down relentlessly on the barren Egyptian landscape. Dr. Matthews wiped the sweat from her brow as she stepped carefully across the shifting sands, her boots crunching against ancient weathered stones. But what caught her attention wasn't the heat, or the dust, or even the massive stone pyramids looming in the distance. No, it was something far stranger, something out of place. At first, it was the symbols. She had seen countless hieroglyphs throughout her career, but these were different. They didn't match any known script from the time of the pharaohs. They were curved in odd ways, almost as if they were meant to convey a hidden meaning. As she examined them more closely, the ground beneath her feet seemed to vibrate. A strange, unsettling hum, faint but constant. Her heart skipped. Could this be? No, it couldn't be. She had been told her whole life that the secrets of the pyramids were lost to history, never to be found again. But here they were, right in front of her. Symbols that didn't belong, etched into a stone slab buried deep beneath the sands, hidden for millennia. The truth was slipping through her fingers, but Ava couldn't pull away. She had to understand it. She had to know what these symbols meant. Her fingers traced the carvings carefully. As her hands moved over the stone, the vibrations grew stronger, almost pulsing. There was a power here, an ancient energy waiting to be uncovered. The desert air grew colder, and an uneasy feeling crept into her bones. "Doctor Matthews, are you okay?" A voice cut through her trance. Her assistant Ethan was standing behind her, concern etched on his face. But Ava barely registered him. All her focus was on the symbols. There was something more to this discovery, something that wasn't meant to be found. The vibrations were now so intense, Ava could feel them through her chest. And then the stone slab shifted, just a little. Her pulse raced. Before she could step back and consider the implications of what she had just unearthed, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the desert, and the ground beneath her feet trembled, as if responding to the ancient energy. The hum reached its peak, and then silence. The slab had moved, revealing a hidden chamber deep within the pyramid. Ava stepped back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't just another tomb, or some forgotten burial site. This was something else, something far more dangerous. "Get the equipment. We need to document this," she said, her voice steady, but filled with an urgency she couldn't ignore. But as Ethan turned to fetch their gear, Ava's mind raced with a single terrifying thought. What if they weren't supposed to find this? And if they did, what would it mean for everything they thought they knew about ancient Egypt? What kind of power could the pyramids be hiding? Was this truly a discovery or a warning? The sound of the wind howling across the desert echoed through the entrance of the newly revealed chamber. Dr. Ava Matthews stood frozen at the threshold, her eyes fixed on the dark void before her. The slab had shifted easily, revealing an ancient narrow passageway carved into the pyramid's heart. The air was thick with dust and the unmistakable scent of ages-old stone, but beneath it all was something else, something electric. The hum she had felt earlier still lingered, now quieter but somehow more insistent, like a whisper in the back of her mind. "Are you sure about this, Doctor Matthews?" Ethan's voice trembled slightly, his gaze flickering nervously. Between the chamber and the horizon, the desert seemed to stretch forever, as though trying to swallow the moment whole. Ava didn't answer immediately. She didn't know if she was sure. How could she be? The symbols she had uncovered were unlike anything she had ever seen before. And now, here was a hidden passage in one of the most studied monuments in history. It could be nothing more than another forgotten tomb, but something deep within her told her this was different. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay beyond was ancient, yes, but also intentional. "Let's go," she said, her voice firm despite the pounding of her heart. She couldn't explain it, but she felt as though the pyramid was calling to her. The darkness of the passage enveloped them as they stepped inside. Their flashlights flickered against the jagged stone walls, casting strange, elongated shadows that seemed to shift on their own. The further they moved, the more the temperature seemed to drop, despite the scorching heat outside. Ava pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the feeling that they were not alone. The chamber they eventually found was smaller than Ava had anticipated. The walls were covered in the same mysterious symbols that had been on the stone slab outside, but they were more intricate here. Woven into the patterns were signs of a different kind of energy, something pulsing with an unnatural rhythm, like the beating of a heart. And then she saw it, a small pedestal at the center of the room, its surface covered in dust, but something was different. A faint glow emanated from beneath a thick layer of grime. Ava's heart leaped into her throat. There was no doubt in her mind now. This wasn't just a tomb. This was something more. "I've never seen anything like this before," Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible in the suffocating silence. "Dr. Matthews, what do you think this is?" Ava took a step closer, her breath hitching. The pedestal was made of a stone she didn't recognize, its surface carved with geometric patterns that seemed to twist and turn when she wasn't looking directly at them. It wasn't the craftsmanship that caught her attention, though. It was the strange energy it exuded. She reached out cautiously, her fingers brushing the surface, and immediately the room seemed to hum with life. The glow intensified. "Something's wrong," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Ava didn't pull her hand away. The symbols were now flashing in her mind, almost as if they were coming to life. She couldn't explain how, but the more she focused on the pedestal, the clearer the patterns became, like a code waiting to be cracked. And then it hit her. This was no ordinary ancient structure. This was an artifact of power. Suddenly she felt it, a presence, deep and ancient, like the weight of 1,000 forgotten years pressing down on her chest. The air grew thick, charged with energy, and in that instant, Ava knew this was no coincidence. This power, whatever it was, had been hidden for a reason. And now that they had found it, they weren't alone. The floor beneath them shifted with a low groan. Ava's heart raced, her instincts screaming to turn back, but she couldn't. "Not now. Get ready," she whispered. "We're not the only ones searching for this." As the ground continued to tremble, a sudden, blinding light filled the chamber. Ava's hand shot up to shield her eyes, but the light was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving behind only an eerie silence. "Did you see that?" Ethan gasped, his voice full of awe and terror. Ava didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was reeling. That light, it wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was a signal. Someone or something was watching. The mystery deepened, and with it, the danger. There was no going back now. What had they discovered? And what would happen when the world learned of it? The power of the pyramids was more than just stone and sand. Someone or something had been waiting for its discovery. But who and why? Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself was thick with something ancient and unseen. The dim glow of their flashlights flickered nervously as they stood in the eerie silence of the hidden chamber. Ethan was still trying to make sense of what had just happened, his eyes darting nervously around the room. But Ava was already thinking ahead, her mind spinning with the implications of what they'd uncovered. The light had disappeared, but the hum had grown louder, more persistent. It seemed to echo within the stone walls, vibrating through her very bones. Was it the pedestal, the strange energy, or was something deeper at work here? Ava took a slow breath, trying to calm her racing heart. The symbols etched into the walls were not just random carvings, like she had first thought. They were arranged in patterns, specific arrangements that were almost too deliberate to be coincidental. As she examined them more closely, she realized that some of the symbols appeared in repeating sequences, while others seemed to be aligned in a way that suggested movement, like gears in a hidden mechanism. What do you think they mean? Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. Ava shook her head slowly, her finger tracing one of the symbols on the wall. I don't know yet, but these aren't just hieroglyphs. These patterns, they're telling a story, or they're a map, or... Her voice trailed off as a chilling realization gripped her. Or they're instructions. Instructions for what? Instructions for activating the pedestal, she said, her voice low but firm. She looked over her shoulder at the ancient artifact in the center of the room. We need to study this. We need to understand how these symbols relate to it, what it's trying to communicate. Ethan nodded, but the fear in his eyes was palpable. Do you really think we should keep going? What if we're playing with something we don't understand? We don't even know what it is. Ava bit her lip, torn between the excitement of discovery and the creeping dread that the ancient forces she was dealing with might be far beyond her understanding. But her curiosity, her insatiable need to solve the mystery, won out. We can't stop now, she said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. If we're right, this could change everything we know about ancient Egypt and about history itself. There was no turning back. Over the next few hours, they meticulously documented the symbols, comparing them to known scripts and ancient texts. Ava's mind raced as she connected the dots. Some symbols matched up with early Egyptian mythology, gods, rituals, and sacred geometry. But there were others, unfamiliar, almost alien symbols that didn't fit. They were newer, more advanced, as if they had been added to the pyramid long after its construction. And then there was the anomaly. One symbol in particular seemed to pulse with energy when Ava's flashlight passed over it. It was simple, just a circle with 3 lines extending outward, but it was unlike anything she had seen before. The strange glow intensified as she leaned in closer, and in that moment, it was as though time itself shifted. The air grew thick with a low hum again, almost imperceptible, like the heartbeat of the pyramid itself. Look at this, Ava murmured, her finger trembling as she traced the glowing symbol. This is it. This is the key. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes wide. What is it? What does it mean? Ava felt a shiver run down her spine. She could feel the power radiating from the symbol now. It was almost like an electric charge, the way it buzzed in the air. I think it's telling us how to activate the pedestal, she said, her voice strained. The symbol, it's connected to everything in here. But it's not just energy. There's something physical to it. She couldn't help but wonder. Could this be the lost secret the ancient Egyptians had guarded so fiercely? Was this the hidden power they had built the pyramids to protect? The answer lay in the pedestal, but the more Ava studied it, the more she realized how little she truly understood. The power she was unlocking was not just an archaeological discovery. It was something more, something that had been carefully hidden for thousands of years, and for good reason. Dr. Matthews, Ethan interrupted, his voice tight. You need to see this. Ava turned to find Ethan standing near the back of the chamber, his flashlight illuminating a small alcove she hadn't noticed before. The alcove was shallow, but on the stone floor she could make out a strange marking. It was another symbol, this one larger and far more complex, as if it were the culmination of everything they had found so far. It wasn't just a symbol, though. It looked like a map of the pyramid's inner chambers, but something was off. The map depicted areas they hadn't seen yet, areas deep within the pyramid's core, where no one had ever ventured. These rooms, they're not listed in any records, Ava whispered, her pulse quickening. This map, it's telling us there's more to the pyramid, more than we ever imagined. The hum in the chamber grew louder, more insistent. Ava felt a rush of adrenaline surge through her body. There were hidden rooms, yes, but there were also hidden forces. Forces that had been locked away for millennia. And the question that gnawed at her now, louder than any hum, was one she couldn't ignore. What was the power they were trying to protect? The map hinted at something deeper, something unseen by modern eyes. But was it a treasure or a trap? Ava was getting closer to the heart of the pyramid, but what lay beneath the stone was more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. The air in the chamber had grown heavier, the hum now vibrating through Ava's chest with an unsettling intensity. Her mind raced as she examined the map-like symbol etched into the stone, the outline of hidden rooms calling to her like a siren song. But with each passing second, the deeper she delved into the pyramid's secrets, the more she felt the weight of something watching, waiting. Dr. Matthews. Ethan's voice was quieter than usual, filled with unease. He had stepped away from the alcove, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting something to spring from the shadows. "Are you sure we should keep going?" Ava hesitated, her fingers still tracing the complex markings on the wall. "We can't stop now. We've only scratched the surface. This could be the discovery of a lifetime." But even as she said the words, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The further they went, the more she began to question whether the pyramid had been built to protect a secret or to keep something locked away. The strange humming in the room seemed to grow louder as she shifted her focus back to the pedestal. The energy felt almost alive, vibrating with a force she couldn't comprehend. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to leave, to retreat back to the safety of the outside world. But curiosity, her insatiable drive to uncover the unknown, held her there. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her ears. The glowing symbol on the pedestal had intensified, pulsating in time with her own heartbeat. Ava's mind raced as she reached for it, fingers brushing the cold stone surface. That's when she heard it. A low, gravelly voice echoed in her mind. "Turn back!" Ava froze, her hand inches away from the pedestal. The voice was faint but unmistakable. It wasn't Ethan's voice. It wasn't even human. The sound seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the pyramid, as if the stone itself had come alive. "Did you hear that?" she asked breathlessly, spinning around to face Ethan. He looked at her, his face pale. "Hear what?" Ava stared at him, her chest tightening with fear. "The voice! It—" Her words faltered, and she felt the cold grip of dread wrap around her throat. Was it the stress, the exhaustion, or was it something deeper? She had no idea. But she knew one thing for sure. The pyramid wasn't just hiding power. It was warning them. "Maybe we should go," Ethan suggested quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "This doesn't feel right." Ava's instinct screamed at her to heed his words. But the symbol, the glowing pedestal, and the map, it was all pulling her in deeper. Her scientific mind told her to take caution, but her curiosity, her need to understand, overpowered the warning. "I can't leave," Ava said softly. She tried to convince herself, as much as Ethan, that they were on the verge of unlocking the greatest mystery of all time. But the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. She turned back to the pedestal, and just as her fingers brushed the stone once more, the air around them shifted. The hum grew louder, more frantic, like a warning siren from the depths of the earth. And then, silence. The silence was deafening. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. Ava's breath caught in her throat. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, and her breath turned to mist in the cold air. Then came the sound. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing in the stone hall. Ava's blood ran cold. "Ethan, do you hear that?" He nodded, his eyes wide with terror. "There's someone else here." Ava swallowed, her pulse quickening. The footsteps were growing louder, closer. But it wasn't just that. There was something else, something she couldn't quite place. The air had shifted once again, thick with an almost palpable tension. "Get the equipment," Ava whispered urgently. "We need to record this. We need to document everything." But as she turned to retrieve their gear, something caught her eye, a shadow in the corner of the room, just beyond the reach of their flashlights. It was moving. Something or someone was there, watching them. Ava's heart hammered in her chest. She moved toward the shadow, her breath shallow and quick. As she drew closer, the outline of the figure became clear. It was a person, but not quite. The figure was tall, draped in dark flowing robes, with a hood that obscured its face. No sound of footsteps, no breathing. It was as if the figure was made of the shadows themselves. Then, in a voice as cold as the air around them, the figure spoke. "You should not have come." Ava's heart nearly stopped. The voice, low, gravelly, and unmistakably human, sent a surge of terror through her body. Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. The figure stepped forward, its presence so overwhelming that Ava could feel it pressing against her chest, suffocating her. It seemed to glide across the floor effortlessly, as if it were part of the stone itself. "I am the Guardian," the figure said. Its voice carried the weight of centuries. "And this is not for your kind to discover." Before Ava could react, the figure raised a hand, and the air around them crackled with energy. Ava staggered back, feeling an invisible force shove her into the wall. The Guardian's gaze, though hidden in shadow, seemed to pierce through her, locking her in place. "You have awakened something that was never meant to be," it intoned, its voice now a low whisper, as though it were speaking from within her mind. "Leave. Leave now, or you will never leave this place." The figure began to fade, its form dissolving into the air like mist. And then, as if nothing had happened, the pyramid fell silent once more. The hum was gone. The shadows receded. Ava's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it a hallucination? A trick of the pyramid's design? Or had they truly uncovered something far darker than they could understand? But one thing was clear now. Someone, or something, did not want them here. And the stakes were far higher than they could have ever imagined. Ava had been warned, but the question remained. Who or what was the Guardian? And why was the pyramid trying so desperately to keep its secrets buried? The silence that followed the Guardian's chilling warning was deafening. Ava stood frozen, her back pressed against the cold stone wall, her heart hammering in her chest. The figure had disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing but the lingering echo of its voice in her mind. The hum, which had filled the room with a strange energy, was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. "What the hell was that?" Ethan's voice trembled, his wide eyes scanning the empty chamber. He was standing a few feet away, his hand gripping the flashlight so tightly his knuckles were white. Ava didn't know how to answer. She had seen something more than a ghost or hallucination. It wasn't just the figure that haunted her. It was the overwhelming sense of danger that had followed it. The warning had felt real, not just like a threat, but like an ancient decree, as though they had disturbed something far beyond their understanding. I don't know, she finally managed, her voice distant and shaken. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But we can't leave. Not now. Ethan glanced at her, confusion and concern clouding his face. Ava, this isn't just about discovery anymore. That thing, whatever it was, it said we've awakened something. It said we wouldn't leave. Ava swallowed hard, but her resolve was already hardening. The sense of urgency coursing through her was too strong to ignore. There was more to the pyramid, more to this discovery, than either of them could fathom. The question now wasn't whether they should leave. The question was, what had they unleashed? Ava stepped away from the wall, moving toward the pedestal again. The air was still cold. Unnaturally so, but something had shifted. The energy in the room, which had been erratic and unpredictable, now felt oddly contained. Almost like it was waiting. For them. For her. Her eyes moved back to the strange symbols on the walls. The map-like design was still there, showing hidden chambers, twisting pathways, rooms that had never been recorded in any history book or archaeological journal. The map had become more than just a guide. It was a blueprint. The pyramid, in some unfathomable way, was alive, and it was drawing her in. Ava! Ethan's voice broke her from her thoughts. He was holding something in his hands, something she hadn't seen before. Look at this. She turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. Ethan was holding a small, ancient-looking artifact, about the size of a coin. Its surface covered in the same strange symbols they had seen earlier. Where did you find that? Ava asked, her voice tight. Ethan's expression was strained. It was inside the pedestal. I don't know how I didn't see it before, but when I touched the stone again, it just appeared. I think it might be the key to everything. Ava took the artifact from him, feeling a strange warmth radiate from it. Though it was cold to the touch, the symbols etched into its surface were unlike anything she had seen on the walls. These were far more intricate, more refined, almost as though they were a combination of ancient Egyptian and something else entirely. Something otherworldly. Ethan, Ava whispered, her breath catching. This isn't just a key. It's a cipher. It's telling us how to unlock the power inside the pyramid. Ava felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. This was no ordinary artifact. Whatever it was linked to the heart of the pyramid, to the ancient power that had been buried beneath the stone for centuries. The ground suddenly trembled beneath their feet. Ava looked up sharply, her eyes wide with alarm. The tremors weren't strong, but they were there, like a warning, deep beneath the earth, sending ripples through the stone. She could hear something, faint, distant, but unmistakable, a low guttural sound, as if the pyramid itself was waking from a long, deep slumber. What's happening? Ethan asked, his voice frantic now. Ava clenched her jaw, her grip tightening around the artifact. The pyramid is reacting to the artifact. It's alive, Ethan. We've disturbed something we weren't meant to. As the tremors intensified, the walls began to shake, sending dust and small stones tumbling to the floor. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift, their patterns rearranging before their eyes, as though the pyramid itself was rewriting its secrets. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the trembling stopped, leaving a suffocating stillness in its wake. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. What was that? Before Ethan could respond, a loud, shrieking sound ripped through the chamber. Ava stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. It sounded like the screech of metal against stone, but louder, unnatural, as though it was being torn apart by a force far beyond human strength. The pedestal, the source of the power, began to glow brighter, a fierce, blinding light pouring from the cracks in the stone. Ava tried to step forward, but the light was blinding, forcing her to shield her eyes. Ethan, she cried, but her voice was swallowed by the rising cacophony. She could feel the floor beneath her feet shift, as if the entire pyramid was beginning to reconfigure itself, opening up to reveal something beneath. Then, as quickly as the light had appeared, it flickered and died. Silence. Ava's hands shook as she lowered them from her eyes. The pedestal was gone. In its place was a door. The door was made of the same stone as the rest of the pyramid, but it was unlike anything Ava had ever seen. It was intricately carved, with more symbols, more patterns, ones that seemed to call out to her as though they were alive. They seemed to pulse, faintly glowing in the dim light. Ava stepped toward it, her fingers trembling as she reached for the door. And just as she touched it, the wall behind her shifted with a grinding sound, and a cold voice echoed once more, though it wasn't the guardian's voice this time. Leave. Now. Before it's too late. The pyramid had revealed a door, but what lay behind it? And who or what was warning them to leave? Ava and Ethan were about to uncover the truth, but every step forward seemed to pull them deeper into a mystery they were never meant to solve. Ava's hand trembled as it hovered above the glowing door, her fingers almost magnetic to the stone surface. The voice, the warning that had echoed through the chamber, still hung in the air like a thick fog, pulling her back, urging her to turn around and leave before it was too late. But she couldn't. Not now. She had come too far. Ethan, this is it, she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile moment. The door before them pulsed with a strange ancient energy, the symbols etched into the stone shifting and undulating as though they were alive, almost beckoning her to open it. But the dread, the feeling that something far older and far more dangerous than they had ever imagined was lurking just beyond, clawed at her thoughts. Ethan stepped closer, his face pale, his hand clutching his flashlight as if it were a weapon. I don't know, Ava. Something doesn't feel right. This place, it's changing. The walls, the floors. It's like the pyramid is shifting. Ava's eyes darted around them. The chamber, once still and silent, seemed to be breathing. Small cracks were appearing in the walls, glowing faintly, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to hum with an energy she could feel deep in her bones. The hum that had once been barely perceptible was now a constant throbbing pulse, vibrating through the stone and into their skin. I know, I feel it too, she said, her voice tense, almost tight with fear. But this door, it's calling to me, Ethan. I have to know what's behind it. This can be the key to everything, the hidden power of the pyramids. We're so close. Her hand hovered over the stone, and as she touched the surface, a deep rumble reverberated through the room. The door shuddered, and for a moment, Ava feared it was going to close again. But then, with a grinding of ancient stone, it began to move, slowly, creaking open, revealing a dark, gaping abyss on the other side. Ava's heart skipped a beat. Beyond the door lay a narrow corridor, its walls covered in more symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. The air that poured from the passage was cold and damp, and the darkness seemed to pull at them like a living entity. Are we really going in there? Ethan's voice was thick with uncertainty, and Ava could see the panic beginning to edge into his eyes. Ava took a deep breath, forcing herself to steady her nerves. We have to. This is the only way to understand what we've uncovered. If we back down now, we'll never know the truth. She stepped forward, her footsteps echoing in the silence as she entered the corridor. Ethan followed hesitantly, his light flickering as he glanced nervously over his shoulder. The walls seemed to close in on them As they walked deeper into the pyramid, the air growing colder, denser with each step. It was as if they were descending into the very heart of the pyramid's secrets. The further they went, the more the walls seemed to shift, the symbols transforming into intricate patterns, ones Ava had never seen before. They were not just Egyptian hieroglyphs. They were something other, something alien. "There's something here," Ava muttered under her breath, her pulse quickening. This is not just ancient Egypt. This is something much older. The corridor stretched on endlessly, twisting and turning, until they reached a large chamber. Ava's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing walls lined with rows of ancient statues, figures of gods, men, and strange, otherworldly creatures. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as though the room had been sealed off from the rest of the world for millennia. But in the center of the room was something far more shocking, a massive crystalline structure glowing with a pulsating light that seemed to throb with a life of its own. It stood taller than any man, its surface shimmering with strange symbols. Symbols that mirrored those on the artifact, the pedestal, and the map. The power it exuded was overwhelming, and Ava could feel it in the very air around her, pressing against her skin like a storm about to break. "This is it," she whispered, her voice reverent, filled with awe. "This is the source, the power the pyramids were built to protect." Ethan's eyes were wide with fear as he stepped closer, the light from his flashlight dancing across the crystalline surface. "What is this thing? It's not just a piece of history. It's alive." Ava nodded slowly, her breath catching. The crystal seemed to hum, its rhythm matching the pulsing energy in the walls, the floor, and in their bodies. It was like it was connected to everything. And the more she looked at it, the more she realized the truth. "This crystal," she whispered, "it's a power source. Not just any power, but something far beyond anything we've ever understood. This pyramid wasn't just built as a tomb or a monument. It was built to contain this power." "Contain it?" Ethan repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "You mean it wasn't a burial chamber? This entire thing, this entire civilization was built to hide this?" Ava's eyes never left the crystal. Yes, the pharaohs knew. They knew there was something here, something far older than Egypt. And they built the pyramids not just as tombs, but as a seal, to keep the power inside, to protect it from getting into the wrong hands. As the words left her mouth, she felt it, a sudden shift. A violent shudder ran through the pyramid, as if the very earth was groaning in agony. The ground beneath their feet trembled once more, stronger this time, and the crystal began to glow brighter, its pulsing light expanding until the entire room was bathed in its eerie glow. Ava's heart raced. The pyramid had been silent for millennia, but now it was waking up. The power, whatever it was beginning to stir. And it wasn't just contained inside the crystal anymore. It was spilling out, rushing through the very fabric of the pyramid, making the walls tremble, the air thicken. "What did we do?" Ethan gasped, stepping back, his face drained of color. Ava could only stare at the crystal, her mind racing with the terrifying implications. They had awakened it. The power was no longer contained. A low rumbling sound filled the chamber, closer now, louder. A distant roar echoed through the pyramid. It wasn't just the crystal that was awakening. The entire pyramid was shifting, as if it were alive, restructuring, realigning itself in response to the power surging within it. And then it hit her. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a trap. A trap to keep something far worse than the power of the crystal from ever escaping. Ava had uncovered the heart of the pyramid, and in doing so, had unleashed something far darker and more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The question now, What would happen when the power was free? And would they be able to survive the pyramid's awakening? The walls shuddered violently as Ava clung to the edge of the crystal pedestal, her flashlight bouncing wildly in the dim, flickering glow. Dust cascaded from the ceiling like a thick veil, obscuring her view of Ethan, who was shouting something she couldn't make out over the deafening roar. "Ethan!" she yelled, her voice cracking. She stumbled backward as the ground shifted beneath her, nearly losing her balance on the trembling floor. Her flashlight beam caught his face, pale, wide-eyed, and frozen with terror, as he clutched at a nearby statue to steady himself. "We have to get out of here!" he screamed, his voice barely carrying above the growing cacophony. "This whole place is coming apart." Ava shook her head, her mind racing. She knew they couldn't leave. Not now. Not after everything they had seen. This was what she had been searching for. Her life's work, the answer to a mystery no one had been able to solve. She couldn't abandon it. She couldn't turn her back on the truth. The crystal at the chamber's center pulsed again, each flash of light brighter and more intense than the last. Ava felt it resonate deep in her chest, vibrating through her bones like a heartbeat, growing stronger, faster. She stumbled closer, shielding her eyes from the blinding glow. "This power," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "It's alive. It's conscious." "What are you talking about?" Ethan's voice was filled with panic as he took a tentative step toward her, his hand still gripping the statue for support. "Ava, whatever that thing is, it's not safe. We need to—" Before he could finish, the ground lurched violently. The statues along the walls toppled like dominoes, crashing to the floor and shattering into pieces. The chamber itself seemed to contract and expand, as if the pyramid were inhaling and exhaling, its ancient stones groaning under the strain. The crystal flared with an intense light, and for a moment Ava thought it might shatter. But instead, the light dimmed, coalescing into a shape. At first, it was just a faint outline, barely visible in the glowing mist. Then it solidified, a tall, humanoid figure, its form made entirely of the same crystalline material. It stood motionless, its face featureless, its limbs elongated and sharp. The energy emanating from it was overwhelming, but pressing down on Ava like a physical weight. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure raised an arm, its movements deliberate and otherworldly. The hum in the room deepened, a low, guttural sound that seemed to echo inside Ava's skull. It wasn't just sound. It was a presence, a voice without words, filling her mind with an unrelenting force. "Ava!" Ethan shouted, his voice distant and muffled, like he was calling to her from underwater. He rushed toward her, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her violently. "Snap out of it! What's happening? What is that thing?" She blinked, the spell momentarily broken. The figure stood still, its faceless head tilted, slightly, as if observing them, studying them. The light within it flickered, patterns of symbols swirling across its surface, the same strange characters they had seen throughout the pyramid. It wasn't just a guardian, it was the source of the power, and it was waking up. "It's not trying to protect the power," Ava said, her voice trembling. "It is the power. This is what they were hiding. Not just a force, but a being, something they couldn't control." The figure turned its head slightly, its crystalline body shimmering in the dim light. It took a single step forward, and the entire chamber seemed to groan in protest. Ava felt the floor beneath her feet crack, the air growing thicker with each passing second. The figure's presence was suffocating, like a storm pressing down on her chest. "What do you want?" she whispered, unsure if the entity could hear her, unsure if it even understood her words. The symbols on its surface pulsed brighter, faster, and suddenly Ava's mind was filled with images. Not memories, not thoughts, images of ancient cities crumbling, of great pyramids standing tall under a blazing sun, of a civilization older than any known to man. She saw people, beings not entirely human, wielding the crystal's power, shaping the world with it before it spiraled out of their control. Ava staggered, clutching her head as the visions faded. She felt Ethan's hands on her arms, pulling her back, shaking her again. Ava, what's happening? Talk to me. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. She tried again, her voice hoarse and barely audible. It's a warning. The pyramid wasn't just built to contain the power. It was built to contain it. The being. They couldn't destroy it, so they sealed it away. Then we need to seal it back, Ethan said, his voice shaking. Ava, if this thing gets out, if it gets loose... Ava looked up at the towering figure, its crystalline body shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time. With the tremor shaking the pyramid, she knew he was right. The being wasn't just a power source. It was a force of destruction, something the ancient Egyptians had tried desperately to keep hidden from the world. But how? How could she stop it now that it was awake? The ground heaved again, and a deafening crack split the air. Stones fell from the ceiling, crashing to the floor around them. Ava's flashlight flickered, then died, leaving them in near darkness. Only the faint, pulsating glow of the crystalline figure remained, illuminating the chamber in an eerie light. She looked at Ethan, her mind racing. We have to find the map, she said, her voice steady now. The map showed more than just the hidden chambers. It must show how to lock it away again. Ethan nodded, though his face was pale with fear. Then let's go, before this whole place comes down on top of us. They turned and ran, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the deep, resonant hum of the crystal being behind them. Ava didn't dare look back. The confrontation had begun, but she knew it was only the beginning. If they failed, the world would never be the same again. The ancient power has awakened. Ava and Ethan have only one chance to stop it. But can they figure out how to seal it away before it's too late? Ava and Ethan stumbled back through the labyrinthine corridors of the pyramid, their breathing ragged, their flashlights flickering weakly against the ever-shifting walls. The ground beneath them trembled with growing intensity, as if the pyramid itself were on the verge of collapse. Every few steps, Ava glanced behind them, half expecting the crystalline figure to appear in pursuit. It hadn't moved from the chamber yet, but the humming pulse in the air told her it was only a matter of time. The map was on the wall, Ava said between breaths, her voice tight with urgency. If I can find it again, if I can remember the sequence, maybe there's a way to shut this down. Ethan nodded, his knuckles white around the flashlight. What if it doesn't work? What if the pyramid... Don't think about that, Ava snapped, more out of fear than frustration. She needed to focus. The visions the being had shown her, images of long-lost civilizations succumbing to the same power, kept flashing through her mind. This thing had been sealed away for a reason. They weren't meant to find it, let alone release it. They reached the chamber where the map had first appeared. Ava skidded to a halt, her eyes darting across the walls, looking for the glowing patterns she had traced before. But the symbols were different now, rearranged as if the pyramid itself were rewriting its own secrets. She ran her hands over the stone, her fingers trembling. Come on, come on! Ethan stood guard, his flashlight beam sweeping the room. The tremors were growing more violent, and the hum had deepened into a low, guttural roar. He glanced at Ava. Whatever you're doing, you have to do it fast. I'm trying. Ava's voice cracked with the weight of the moment. Then her eyes caught something. Faint traces of the original pattern beneath the new arrangement. It was as if the pyramid had layered new glyphs over the old ones, trying to hide the instructions. She reached for a piece of charcoal from her pack and began furiously sketching the symbols on her notebook. I think this is it. These are the original markings. Ethan watched her work, his tension palpable. What now? You can't just read that thing out loud and hope it works, right? Ava ignored the question, focusing instead on deciphering the sequence. The lines converged into a central point, a symbol that matched the one on the artifact they had found. "It's the key," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "The artifact is the key." She pulled the artifact from her pocket, its surface warm to the touch, the symbols etched into it glowing faintly. The hum in the room seemed to respond, rising in pitch, almost as if the pyramid were aware of what she was doing. "If I can align it with the pattern here." She placed the artifact against the wall, aligning it with the central glyph. The moment it touched the stone, the entire chamber lit up with a blinding light. The ground heaved, nearly throwing them both off their feet. Ava clenched her teeth, gripping the artifact tightly. A deep voice, ancient and resonant, echoed through the chamber. Not the guardian's voice, but something more profound, more detached. "The seal is broken. The seal must be restored." Ava didn't know if the voice came from the pyramid, or the artifact, or the being itself, but it was clear what she had to do. The artifact wasn't just a key, it was also a lock. It had been created to contain the power, to seal the being away, just as the ancients had done before. "Ethan," she said urgently, "the crystal in the main chamber, it's the source. This artifact, it can shut it down." "What?" Ethan's face was a mix of confusion and fear. "Ava, you're talking about going back in there. That thing, it's not going to let you just walk in and lock it up." "I know," Ava said grimly. "But if we don't, this whole pyramid will collapse, and it won't stop there. The power, the destruction." She trailed off, swallowing hard. "I have to try." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's go." They ran back through the corridors, the rumbling growing louder, the walls vibrating violently around them. When they reached the central chamber, the sight stopped them both in their tracks. The crystalline figure was now fully animated, its glowing surface radiating energy in waves. The room was bathed in an otherworldly light, the air thick with power that made it hard to breathe. The being turned toward them. No eyes, no face, but an undeniable awareness. The room pulsed with its presence, each vibration shaking Ava to her core. She gripped the artifact, stepping forward despite her fear. Her hand shook as she held it out. The being moved, not walking, but shifting in place, as though it were an extension of the crystal itself. Ava felt its attention fix on her, an immense pressure bearing down. Her mind swam with images again. Destruction, collapse. The echoes of civilizations lost to the power it held. But then something else. A moment of stillness, a single image of the pyramid, whole and quiet, its power contained once more. The artifact in her hand began to glow brighter, its light matching the pulse of the crystal. Ava stepped closer, her legs trembling, the hum in her chest now a deafening roar. She pressed the artifact against the crystalline figure, aligning its symbols with the central point of light. The being didn't fight her. It simply stood, motionless, as though it understood what she was doing. A blinding flash erupted, followed by a soundless explosion of light that seemed to fold in on itself. Ava was thrown back, landing hard on the stone floor. She looked up, her vision swimming, to see the crystal dimming, the glow fading. The hum subsided into silence. The being was gone. The chamber was still. Ava sat there for a long moment, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. The artifact lay on the ground beside her, dark and lifeless. It had done its job. Ethan rushed over, his voice breaking through her daze. "Ava, are you okay?" She nodded weakly, struggling to her feet. The air was still thick with dust, but the pyramid no longer trembled. The walls were solid, the ground steady. "We did it," she said softly, her voice almost inaudible. It's contained. They made their way back to the surface in silence, the weight of what they had seen, what they had done, hanging heavy between them. When they finally stepped out into the sunlight, Ava turned back to look at the pyramid, its ancient silhouette cutting against the sky. "What now?" Ethan asked. Ava didn't answer right away. She thought of the warnings, the visions, the power they had just sealed away. What if someone else found it? What if it wasn't truly over? Finally she spoke, her voice quiet. "We never came here. We never saw any of this, and we make sure no one else ever does." Ethan nodded solemnly, and together they walked away, leaving the pyramid and its secret buried once more. Ava and Ethan have stopped the power from escaping, but the pyramid's secret remains. The question lingers: how long can such a truth stay hidden?